nine, eight, seven, six, five, four, three, two, one.
Welcome everybody, and this is the Newchip presentation on a new phenomena that's going on in the world called the future of fashion. Today, my name is Shamini Dhana, and I'm one of the Newchip members, and my company is Dhana Inc. I'm going to share with you on screen here what we're going to be covering. And today we have with us 3 other speakers who are renowned in their industries as well as expertise. We have Karla Mora, who is the founder and managing partner of Alante Capital. She's based out of California today. Cyndi Rhoades comes from London talking to us, and she's the founder of One Again Technologies. And of course, we have Tara Donaldson, who's now the new executive editor of WWD and the former editor of Sourcing Journal. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to have you, and thank you for being on board the very first historical panel discussion for Newchip on fashion and the future of fashion. Today, we're going to be discussing a few topics that covers in a very high level what is currently the state of fashion and the impact of the global fashion industry, and why circular fashion matters today. Also, we'll cover what are we currently doing to enable fashion, circular fashion in terms of investments, and what the future will look like in the circular fashion industry as we move ahead. And finally, we'll have an open discussion on what advice we do have for fashion brands and consumers, simply to get some ideas on the table as we move forward. To start off, I'd like to share a quote from Ellen MacArthur Foundation that sets the stage of what's going on in the fashion industry. I'll read this to you. It says, every second, the equivalent of 1 garbage truck of textiles is landfilled or burned. And this is an estimated US $500 billion in value lost every year due to clothing that's barely worn and rarely recycled. If nothing changes by 2050, the fashion industry will use up 1/4 of the world's carbon budget. We no doubt have a grave issue at hand. And with this, let's turn to Tara Donaldson to set the stage in terms of where we are when it comes to the fashion industry. Okay, go ahead, Tara.
Okay, thank you, Shamini. So as she alluded to, fashion was already in a challenged state before 2020. And with everything that this year has thrown at the world, the conditions are only becoming more challenged. We're in the midst of a pandemic that largely shuttered everything for the last several months. And as global populations were forced to prioritize needs over wants, fashion largely took a backseat. So it didn't help that the pandemic began in China, where it's still considered the world's factory, even though other countries have started to take on some of that manufacturing. So what that meant was raw materials were tied up. So factories in China closed, but also factories in Bangladesh and Vietnam and places like that also suffered because they weren't able to get the yarns and fabrics they needed to manufacture garments in their own countries. So what that created was a supply crisis for the industry. So further downstream, boarded up retail businesses meant furloughed workers, and no one was venturing out into the crisis to shop for clothing. Fashion has contributed a fair amount to the 44 million people in America who have filed for unemployment since the beginning of the pandemic. And with so many consumers out of work, that meant disposable income to spend on things like fashion was also squeezed, which brought us to the demand crisis. In the midst of both, inventory has just continued to pile up because factories were left with orders that brands didn't want to take in, which meant the garments were sitting in factories, and then retail stores were closed, which meant garments were sitting unsold in stores. So now the issue of circularity and excess waste in the fashion industry becomes even more of an issue, because even at great discounts, it'll be challenging to clear some of this inventory, which means what happens to it when it can't get sold in the stores, and landfill is always the last place we want things to end up. So fashion is facing a contraction. This vicious cycle of bad news has depleted sales, which are only just now starting to recover. It has meant fashion companies' cash flows are drying up. Many companies haven't been able to pay their factories, which haven't been able to pay their workers, which means there's a contraction on the supply side. As many as 100 factories in Bangladesh have already reportedly closed, and more may be on the way. And on the retail side, the bankruptcies are left and right. Neiman Marcus has filed, JCPenney has filed, though they may be emerging shortly. J. Crew has filed, Brooks Brothers, Lord & Taylor, Ascena Retail Group, Lucky Brand, and the list goes on. And if you ask McKinsey and Company, it's only going to worsen. They expect revenues will contract between 20 and 30% in the next few months, which means more bankruptcies. And with bankruptcies comes store closures. And already more than 13,000 stores, retail stores in the industry, have either already closed or are slated to do so this year. On top of all of that, we're in a dual pandemic. So on one side, we're facing a health crisis, and on another, a racial uprising that's been long in the making. Fashion has been a big target in the Black Lives Matter movement because of its inauthenticity. So, some brands have posted Black social media squares, but that hasn't resonated well with consumers because they feel like the allyship is performative and they're not really supporting a change in the industry. And that may seem tangential, but fashion's ability to sustain itself is tied directly to its ability to both lessen its environmental footprint and ramp up its social responsibility and purpose, because that's what consumer loyalty depends on now. And then generationally, if you look at millennials, who will soon hold the greatest buying power, and even more so the incoming Gen Z generation, they won't spend with brands whose ethos and ethics they don't believe in. So where does fashion go from here? Things are definitely going to get worse before they get better. The contraction will continue. The shakeout will leave many behind. And according to McKinsey projections, we may not see the industry fully recover to 2019 levels until 2023. So it's a long way forward, but it's a reckoning that's necessary for the industry, because fashion had perhaps spread too far. We had too many stores, too many brands, too many options that became uninteresting, that consumers weren't willing to pay full price for anyway. Too much product that didn't get sold, which meant too much product going to landfill, which meant too much waste. Going forward, it's going to be about a brand story, and that story is going to be how it's able to take care of its upstream workforce, how it's able to take care of its corporate staff as well, how it's able to prioritize sustainability over mass production, how it's able to take more waste from the environment. So that may mean fewer brands, fewer stores, made-to-order models instead of mass production based on gut feeling. It may mean higher retail prices. But if companies can get their brand and their purpose and their story right, that's what consumers will buy into. Thank you.
Great, Tara. We now have a short video that we want to play.
When it comes to fashion, if it looks great, it should be worn. If it's by our skin, it should be safe. And when it's worn out, it shouldn't be wasted. Sounds like common sense, right? But that's not how it is today. 1 truckload of clothing is being burned or landfilled every second. Mountains of clothes are stuck in warehouses and at the bottom of our wardrobes. And less than 1% of used clothing is turned back into new clothes. Globally, it's costing us billions of dollars every year. This shouldn't be the price of looking and feeling good. People's demands and expectations are changing. It's time the fashion industry changes too. To thrive in the future, we need a fashion industry made up of 3 elements. Business models that keep clothes in use for longer, like sharing, swapping, rental, repair, and resale. Materials that are safe and renewable, so our clothes do not release microfibers that pollute our oceans, and making them does not destroy local ecosystems. Solutions, so used clothes are turned into new, designing and making clothes so the materials can be used again and again and again. It's a new ambition for a fashion industry where clothes never become waste. There's so much that brands can do now, but no organization can shift the system alone. Make Fashion Circular brings together people across the entire industry to develop new solutions, scale the ones that work, and build a fashion industry that's beautiful, inside and out.
Hey, so that was a very powerful recording demonstrating where we are going and what we need to happen, what needs to happen from taking it from linear to circular. And thanks to Ellen MacArthur Foundation, that was a creation by them. So now we have up Karla Mora, who is the founder and managing partner for Alante Capital. And Karla, you're going to be talking to us about where the investments are being made today in the fashion industry. And this is a very highly sought after sort of information and knowledge that a lot of people are trying to figure it out because of everything that Tara was talking about, considering that we're on a decline or a verge of an explosion. So love to hear your views.
Well, thank you for having me, Shamini. It's nice to be here with everybody. And yeah, I'm happy to talk a lot about the investment opportunities that we see in the fashion industry. I think for all of the many reasons that Tara was explaining, investors get frightened by the industry. They see the store closures, the bankruptcies, and are not really quite sure how to approach fashion. But what we see is a huge opportunity because people are going to continue to wear clothes forever and going to be needing to have brands to be able to fulfill that. So brands aren't going to just bankrupt quickly or not try. Some will, but many will continue to push forward and try to become more ethical, more sustainable, more attractive to the younger buying demographic that Tara was discussing. And so what we do at Alante Capital is really look at what are the innovative new technologies that are going to become the toolbox for these brands to have what they need to be able to produce, sell, and recover garments in a sustainable manner. And what is the new technology buying platforms, sharing platforms that consumers are going to need to be able to participate in the truly circular economy for the fashion industry. So with that as kind of the thesis behind the fund, we set out to invest and seed really early stage innovation that can help to drive a systemic change for the industry. So we're not looking at brands to invest in brands, we're looking at what are the tools that brands really need. So if you can open up my slides, I can show everyone a little bit about what exciting technologies we're seeing out there. So for the last 4.5 years, my partner Leslie and I have been actively tracking emerging innovation across the apparel industry through this kind of circular thesis. So what we look at is what are the innovations happening on production, what's happening and changing in new raw materials coming out, what's happening around the dye process. It takes so many resources to be able to produce a garment. There are so many steps that are required between cotton grown to garment made. And all of those steps along the chain create opportunities for improvement in the efficiency in which it's produced, improvement in the chemicals and the raw materials required to make it. So there's a lot of exciting areas of investment opportunity that have come up looking at supply chain. One of the most important areas when thinking about production for us happens actually brand level when thinking about inventory planning. And how are we going to decide how much of a product is being made in what color and what size before it's even produced. As I was just saying, it requires a tremendous amount of resources to produce a garment. So let's get it right from the beginning. And we're very far off from that. But there are a lot of exciting technologies emerging to help brands start better understand inventory. So we look at raw materials, dyeing, processing, finishing, cut and sew. That's where we start to see really cool techniques like zero waste cutting, technologies like Flyknit in the shoe. If you see Nike and Adidas, Allbirds, being able to have these knit shoes that don't leave waste on the factory floors. We're seeing innovation happening everywhere in the production channels. When it comes to design, distribution, use, now we're looking at, okay, a product has been produced. How are we thinking about the inventory management, the sales distribution? With the shift towards e-commerce, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on the packaging, shipping, environmental outcomes. So how can we clean that up? How can we better manage and see better transparency across the supply chain so we can ensure that the good practices that we are working on doing are actually happening? And then once a good is in circulation, is shared, sold, reused as many times as possible, we look at how can it be recovered? What's happening to collect waste, recover it, or mechanically break it down to be able to be used for new materials to go right back into that production channel. So we've been tracking technologies, big and small, new and old, along these channels for years. So you can go to the next slide, please, Shamini. How that's translated to us is a robust pipeline of great companies, stage companies that are both investable from a venture capital perspective. So we're an early stage VC fund. We have a 10-year time frame for our fund. We're expecting market rate or above returns. That's really important to us as we're looking at what types of technologies fit with requirements of funds, because we see a lot of exciting things out there that are just maybe not. Venture isn't the right type of capital, but there is a whole lot that is. In fact, right now, we have over 160 companies in our pipeline that fit within our thesis that are investable with a venture scope, anywhere from the seed through Series B. So we're excited because the opportunities in this area have grown tenfold over the last 3 years. It's really an exciting space. So all of those issue areas that I was just discussing, those become these different startups that create great opportunities. The first one in the raw materials bucket, Mango Materials, was our first investment we made. It's a biodegradable alternative to polyester fiber. It's basically a PHA made from waste methane. It's a really exciting technology. They've raised their Series A and they'll be raising their Series B next year. So another one, if you look through, we see on the dye side, processing and finishing, cut and sew, there's different types of technologies that are all creating the tools that brands are needing, whether it's on-demand manufacturing, Nimbly does that. Perfitly is a really big one now, with brands having to shift to digitizing everything that they're doing, whether it's sampling, creation of the samples from the beginning, not being able to travel to the factories or be able to feel the fabrics. They're looking at what kind of digital solutions can help us solve that problem, and then how we create digital avatars, shoppers, so that when we're going on to buy things online, we're having an experience that we would get in a retail store. So we can essentially try it on, we can style it, we can know what it would look like, but look like as it wears on your body, to help to try and get consumers to purchase the right product from the first time. And Perfitly is one of the technologies that we're really excited about, that provides some of that technology. It helps all brands to understand what customer looks like, what their customer expects, and that helps right size on the back end, because they're able to collect so much data. So even though it's you know, there's a tremendous loss with the shutting down of so many retail. There's also this exciting opportunity for brands to start to capture more accurate data about their buyers because everything is happening online. So there are lots of exciting opportunities. I don't want to take too much time, but I can say that when we're looking at these different companies, you know, we look at theme, the market opportunity, which we know is huge. One of the big strategies that Alante does is we partner with the leading apparel companies across the industry who are actively working to engage with innovation. And so we can gauge from them what is truly viable from a cost perspective, how can it drop into the supply chain. We're able to gauge kind of what the potential exit opportunities would be. And then we help to drive these startups to market with these brands. So there's a lot of exciting opportunity here. We're very active co-investors, so we bring investors from outside of the apparel industry into this space as much as we can to help to bring up and really share that this industry as a whole is ripe for and innovation. So at the end of kind of this circle over here on the slide deck, after distribution and use, we look at circular recovery. And this is the piece that is going to truly enable circularity within the apparel industry. There are technologies required across the entire map to help for circularity, but being able to take a garment and recover the fibers all the way down and be able to use those fibers to replace virgin fibers and make new clothes is really kind of the key to unlock that. And that's Titan Biosciences and Worn Again, and that are two great examples, and we're about to hear from one. So I wanted to end with how exciting we think this opportunity is and crucial for enabling circularity.
Excellent.
So thanks, everyone.
So thank you so much, Karla. That was a great insight into the investment strategy of both Alante as well as where the money is going in circular fashion. Appreciate what investments and commitments you have and your team as well. So lastly, we're going to hear from Cyndi Rhoades over in London.
I'm going to talk about some of these issues in a different light from the perspective of our technology and why we developed it. We're in year 8 now of developments. And yeah, starting out here with the next slide, hopefully. There we go. So I think circularity from our perspective, from everyone's perspective, it's all about resources. Circularity sometimes gets perceived as an environmental issue, but I would argue, and it's very clear, that there are huge economic opportunities, and ultimately the economics are what will drive it, which is why the title Circular Economics really makes sense. So from a resource perspective, this has really got me going, and this is what drives our company. You know, we're consuming a huge amount of resources to make textiles every year. The demand for these resources, the raw materials that go into textiles, are set to increase by 63% in the next 10 years. And at the same time, we're throwing away almost as much as we're buying every year. And then you've got the tiny little 1% there, which we saw in the Ellen MacArthur film, that less than 1% of any textile, all textiles are going back into or being recycled at all. Very low collection rates, but even once they are collected, very little is going back into recycling. And just a quick note on why this is the case. So we can put collection systems into place. We can aggregate them, sort them, separate them into rewearable clothing, which is great. If clothing can be reworn, that is the absolute best solution, economically and environmentally. The challenge is that a lot of textiles that get collected aren't actually rewearable and have very little value. And today they're being downcycled into lower value products, which is great. It's a second life product, but ultimately those two are going to landfill. So this is really our starting point when we set up as a company to understand what were the challenges behind textile recycling. Why is only less than 1% going back into new textiles? Primarily, there are economic and technical challenges behind turning existing textiles back into new textiles. Mechanical recycling, which is really the predominant method that we have today, is unable to recapture those raw materials in a way that can produce a virgin equivalent raw material. So those were, and some of the technologies of the mechanical recycling in existence today, not only are the outputs sort of they can sometimes be inferior in quality, but often they'll come with a price premium. So it's really not a huge, it's not very attracting to brands. And so with these challenges, we set out to develop a process that was able to overcome these challenges. Just in a nutshell, I won't take you through each of all of the steps here, but essentially we're able to take in polyester and cotton end-of-use textiles, so non-rewearable textiles. They can be pure polyester or polycotton blends, which represents a huge proportion of what gets made today. We can also take in bottles. It's PET, polyester, it's the same material. The inputs, or what we call inputs, come into the beginning of the process. We're able to separate out the dyes and the other contaminants that went into those products at the beginning. We're then able to separate the polyester and the cotton. The PET goes through one strand, the cotton goes through another. On the PET side, we're able to dissolve it into a solvent, separating out everything else and recapturing that polyester as a pure polymer that then gets rebuilt back into a virgin equivalent polyester. So it's the same exact chemical structure, quality, and makeup that you would get from polyester made from virgin oil, which is a huge advance. And it means brands don't have to compromise on quality. On the cotton side, we're able to, we break down the cotton to recapture the cellulose, which is, comes out in the form of a cellulosic pulp. And that cellulosic pulp is the equivalent of what we're using today from trees, cutting down, growing trees to make a cellulosic fiber, which is still a nice natural process. Well, the process itself, viscose production, isn't very natural, but using trees to produce a fiber. What we're doing is being able to recapture the cotton, the cellulose from cotton in existing textiles, so that we no longer have to use trees to make cellulosic fibers. So really the aims of this technology, harking back to the two previous talks, is that number one, we've got the quality of outputs. That's first and foremost. There can't be a compromise there. But secondly, the process itself has to be environmentally friendly and more beneficial than virgin production, without a doubt. Otherwise, there's no point. And then thirdly, equally important, the outputs from our process have to be able to compete on price with either their virgin counterparts or other circular raw material processes. So really that's our target with this technology. If we want to be able to replace the use of virgin raw materials, we need to be able to compete with them, to just do them out and put them in the history books. We have enough end-of-use textiles already in circulation today and being thrown away today to satisfy our annual demand for making new textiles. I mean, it's ludicrous. We already have these resources, yet we're using less than 1%. So I think this is the game changer with what's often called chemical recycling. We like to call it regenerative recycling in terms of what we're doing. Chemical has a negative connotation, I think, definitely in the fashion industry. And so I think there's a huge amount of learning and awareness that needs to happen around this type of technology, so that we can really, advance the knowledge and really get the entire industry and the investment community engaged. Quick overview here of, this is the circularity bit. So our little part here is, as Karla was saying, we're just in the raw material bit. That is our role. If we can take end-of-use textiles, reprocess them, churn them back into the industry as virgin equivalent raw materials, that is our little part that then enables true circularity. But you have to take a systemic approach. If we don't understand where textiles are coming from, if we don't understand consumer behavior, if we don't have brands engaging and communicating to their consumers to say every product you buy has to go back into the system, then we lose one link in that chain and you can't achieve a circular future. So it really is key that we move from this linear thinking to circular. One last slide here just to show you, innovation doesn't happen quickly, and especially when it comes to a new manufacturing innovation. It takes on average for a new technology like this, on average about 10 years to go from lab scale to first industrial plant. We're in year 8. This is our pilot plant up in Redcar in the north of England. It's near Newcastle, and it's really a significant step for us in terms of scaling to industrial plant. And as soon as we've got that blueprint for our industrial plant, we will be selling it like crazy around the world to get as many plants as possible up and running so that we can replace the use of virgin resources. Thank you.
Wonderful. That was excellent, Cyndi. What a powerful technology you have. And I want to say that it is definitely timely now, especially with the data over there. I'm going to now do a little overview of Dhana Inc., which is actually one of the Newchip companies, and what we are doing in terms of moving the fashion industry towards circular fashion. Here we go. So Dhana is at the innovative edge of circular fashion. We're a company that's been around for 10 years, and we're disrupting the industry with the notion of circular fashion. We believe that we can build a high-tech, people-centric solution so that customers now are given the power as well as the choice in terms of creating their own designs. We're doing this because of today's calamity, and as Tara and the rest of the speakers here have shared, that over 73% of the world's clothing ends up in the landfill. How we do this is the whole notion of 4 circular strategies. Today, Dhana is one of the companies in the signatories of the Global Fashion Agenda that we signed back in 2017. The 4 circular strategies that we are committed to and we're executing on. 1, we're designing from zero waste onwards. Number 2, we actually have a take-back program. And 3, we are producing on-demand fashion for customers as they design and using their own clothing or clothing from overstock or dead stock. And then the 4th strategy is our partnership with Worn-Again Technologies. And with this, we do believe that there is a solution for on-demand going forward. And so Dhana is here as a climate change solution. We're transforming the fashion industry through what we would call co-creation, putting the customer at the center of the decision-making and the on-demand side, so that with technology, they're able to drag and drop on a platform that enables them not only to create designs and garments, but also to be able to choose based on prioritization of what they feel is important to them, where they place their value, and how they believe they can be the solution to climate change. We're unleashing this particular platform later on this fall, and we're hoping that we are able to lead the charge together with a whole bunch of collaborators and stakeholders so that we can impart a new mindset that your choices really do matter, and that the the pieces of garments that you choose have the ability to be extended in terms of life as well as purpose. And so we're truly excited about this opportunity, and stay tuned as we design this platform and unleash it. Our circularity pledge enables the customer to not only just reduce and reuse, measure it, you're able to repair it, recycle it, and also reflect. And this is a whole bunch of stakeholders realizing that a system approach where the awareness building needs to happen from the get-go. So that's Dhana's contribution, our offering to a mindset going forward. And we're hoping that our stakeholders like the media, the different companies like One Again, and the different investors like Karla, your company, all support this embodiment of sustainability. Let's stop the discussion and turn towards perhaps the last few minutes on some of the concerns you might have in the fashion industry when it comes to either consumer awareness, especially during this time, as well as some of the advice that you might have going forward for fashion brands and the stakeholders in the fashion world. Tara, do you want to have a last few comments before we close?
Sure. I think the biggest problem is the culture of consumption, just having more, even when you don't need it. So I think the first problem to tackle is that on the consumer side. And I think what may help that is, kind of going in a opposite direction than fast fashion has gone, because if it's not so cheap and so easy to access, you may try to have fewer pieces that you invest in and that you keep for a longer time. So on the other side of it, retailers and brands have always had a kind of culture of let's just make all of this stuff and then try to push it out to the market. They don't have a good sense of the demand and actually making for that demand. So I think they're going to have to get better about that, use more data, use more technology to understand what's really needed so that there's not excess inventory, which then becomes excess waste, which then just perpetuates the problem. So I think it's recognizing that we don't need to consume just for the sake of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good points. Karla, yourself.
Sure. I think advice to any new fashion brands that are coming out, a lot of great industry networks and groups that are out here supporting a shift towards a sustainable circular economy, fashion positive, textile exchange. There are a number out there where you can actually learn from other brands, other stakeholders, get access to preferred fibers, learn best practices on how to work with startups. So there's tools out there. You don't have to go at this alone. Even, we work with a lot of brands on all of those things as well. So yeah, I think tap into those resources and find what opportunities are out there. Think about business model in a new way. I see a lot of exciting, really cool new sustainability brands that are adding a rental or option from the very beginning. So when you purchase your products, you can create an easy and seamless way to be able to resell it once you're done. And if you're not ready yet to wear those timeless pieces and you still have an ever-evolving wardrobe, maybe rental is a good solution. So just thinking as a brand, who is your consumer and how can you meet them where they are at, while trying to educate them to become a more conscious consumer? What kind of services can you provide to attract them through that process? There's a lot out there. So, yeah.
Excellent points. Yeah. And Cyndi.
Yeah. So I think from an industry perspective, or I think what's needed, what I'd love to see is more imagination around where is it we're trying to get to? What is the goal? what does a circular future look like? And if you think about it from, you know, if circularity is all about products staying as products for as long as possible, and when they're no longer able to be products, they get broken down into raw materials to go back into new products, what does that ideal future look like? You know, what are our planetary boundaries? How much polyester we can keep in circulation, for how much cotton we can grow, for how much cellulose, all the new materials like mango materials, you know, what does that actually look like? And once we've kind of imagined where it is we want to get to, we can then work backwards and start creating a timeline and a map, putting in all of those great new technologies and new solutions that all the brands are engaging in, but just bringing them together under one umbrella to say, okay, right, it's going to be another 5 years for this one, but this one we can do today. That one's going to be another 10, 15 years, but at least it gives you that sense of, you know, future and hope and engagement, and everyone becomes a part of making that happen. I'd love to see that roadmap take greater shape.
That's excellent too. Brilliant points, all three of you. I mean, I can't but have the best panel here to talk about the various aspects. I'll tell you what I'm really excited about when I talk to customers and our team. And I envision a future whereby we're putting a pause button from just needing the next best thing and focusing our energies on creativity. We are all creators ourselves, and we have the ability to create new clothing, not necessarily tangible as well. And this is where the advancement of technology is coming to play. When you see fashion shows going virtual in the digital world, this is a new introduction for customers to get involved and consumers to now be able to design online, pick fabrics they want, share it with different customers and family and social networks of their own, be able to look at it from a 3D perspective, collaborate on a virtual platform, and then also be able to see your whole entire wardrobe in a materials library. And then using machine learning and AI technology to be able to tell you when you're creating your next garment, what possibly could mix and match in your current wardrobe. This is all coming about. This is the power of technology, and I'm very excited that my own company is embarking and actually utilizing, leveraging all these different technologies in order to provide solutions like this. Once we're able to create on a whole different scale, customers now have the ability to not only see in advance the environmental impact, but also perhaps the ethical side of the equation, which unfortunately is the missing equation here. What if a platform were to give you that nuances of who actually made your clothes and be able to talk to the people who did, right? So now we're linking both social and environmental side. So ultimately, I think technology has the ability to not only just, I want to use the word humanize clothing, but ability to actually inject our creativity into a piece of clothing that once you do so, the value then starts to happen so that people now want to be part of that story, to be able to say, I created that together with others, and that with that, I have stories to tell in the future, and we're going to share this, and more collaboration will take place on this level playing field. So that's what I'm more excited about than ever, the leveraging of the technology, and Dhana is definitely a first mover advantage on this side, but we couldn't do it without, you know, people like yourself. We need, you know, media platforms to be able to showcase what's really happening in the world today, both socially, environmentally, the opportunities that are out there. We need once again technologies, companies like yourself that are tackling one of the biggest problems on world history, And of course, we need investors like Karla, who really are committed to making the change that happens in the world. So on that account, I want to thank you so much for your commitment, as well as your time, your energy, your creativity. Stay tuned. Newchip is going to be doing more of this. And again, appreciate all your energy and resources and time. Thank you.